Welcome to Support Life, a program focusing on current social issues from a life-affirming perspective. I'm Gavin Baulch and my guest is Denise den-Bakker. And she was once a special report coordinator for The Australian, has been on 3AW and worked there, and the old 3XY, as we know as the old rock and roll station. So welcome, Denise.
Thank you, Gavin.
Good.
Pleasure to be here.
And this is twice now we've met and had a chat.
Yes, I feel very privileged.
Good.
Yeah.
Your life's experience is broad
Yes.
and full, and in fact you're prepared to sacrifice some sleep so that you're informed and well read.
Yes, that's true. I love to read.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And research as well.
Yes, and research, yes.
Okay. What's caught your attention these past few weeks?
Well, I guess a lot of what I've been reading has been looking at probably more health, women's health, and the need for it to inform policy. I guess I'm really concerned with the way that there's a lot happening to women, and I'm still not sure why, but it's not being spoken about. And I think we need to look at what's going on, measure it, listen to what people are saying of their experiences in women's health, this is. And I think we need to look at the satisfaction of people once they've been through the experience in women's health in particular. We need to measure everything that's going on around us, all kinds of medical health procedures. That's really important because it's from there that we can find a way forward. And of course we always look at, how can we improve things? How can something be done better? And I suppose probably a big focus at this time too, and we hear daily in the government and Mr Hockey, key words like, can we afford it? Can the country afford it? And I guess we need to look at whether or not procedures that are actually being paid for from our state and federal budgets, are they effective? Are they helping women? Are we measuring them, and are we measuring them properly? And I say that, I base that on reasons, of just what are clearly, increasing, mental health, post-traumatic stress disorder, all kinds of psychological trauma.
So you really do have it on good authority that young women are increasingly struggling with mental health issues. What shape are these issues presenting themselves?
In a variety of ways. A lot of people may be thinking that there's actually just something, and I shouldn't say just, people may be feeling that there's something wrong with them. They might not be able to identify what it is. They might be feeling sick all the time. It can manifest in a whole host of ways, but something that perhaps people might identify with, being called a post-traumatic stress disorder. Until you actually see it written down and the symptoms of a PTSD, you probably don't realise that you're experiencing or suffering from that.
All right, let me just go back over the fact that Anzac Day has come and gone. And there's a desire for families to seek the remains, so to find out some of the history. Where are they? Where are they buried? Can we rebury them? Can we give them that rite of passage? Can we have closure?
Yes.
These types of things, which often even return servicemen from overseas in some of the battle enclosures that they're contained in, they come back and the trauma is so great they can't talk about it for years. It's almost too late to do something.
Yeah.
Now, how are some of these traumas being presented in our women folk?
Well, this really is the crux of a huge problem, because there's many shapes and forms, but I suppose we can only sort of look at the experience of those close to us that we know. And I suppose in seeing, someone go through a loss, they might have lost a child, it may not have seemed too big a deal at the time. It was early anyway, this kind of thing. And a lot of the time I think people have to rationalise in this way, well-meaning, but it's a way of coping. But unfortunately, our mind and our heart and our soul, and in fact our body as well, eventually, knows that it's carrying something, and it hasn't been felt. It hasn't really been. The word is processed, and again, unless you've been through an experience like this, you don't even understand what that word processed actually means. So a lot of people, I think, are walking around very wounded, but perhaps not realising that they're wounded. Perhaps short-tempered, irritable, tired, maybe having a lot of trouble sleeping. It's all very common responses to trauma, where you've lost something but you may not even, you've had to continue on in the rush of life and you haven't actually had the opportunity to realise what's gone on because you're just trying to cope.
Okay, so we're lacking a vocabulary?
That's a lot of it. That is a lot of it. Because unless people are speaking the words to you and unless you are seeing language, our culture's, created, by ourselves, we're all part of it, but we all work in different areas of life. And with media, we come across various kinds of media every day, and unless we're hearing these things spoken, these realities, we're not going to be able to express ourselves. And therein lies our problem, where if people aren't talking about these sorts of things, then it kind of seems taboo. Then these things become awkward to raise. So
there's a silence that's screaming at us.
That's right, yes.
Well, we'll take a break. You're watching Support Life, and we're going to be back after the break. Welcome back to Support Life. I'm Gavin Baulch and my guest is Denise den-Bakker. We're talking about how silence screams at us. We don't have words to articulate what's happening inside. How can we improve that?
Well, I think what we're doing today is a really big step forward in that area. I think the readiness of people in media, particularly, and in hearing and listening, letting people tell a story. But there is a bit of a catch in this one where a lot of people who've had the kind of experiences we've been speaking about, the silence, it's something that people have a lot of trouble in finding the language for. So who is going to speak? So there we have a bit of a problem, and there's a need for advocacy in this area. And I guess that's what I've been hoping to do, having experienced a degree of loss myself, but also having a heart for other people who've been through a different kind of loss and more profound, which I've actually seen just countless times, more times than I can remember. And seeing and hearing the pain of people whose needs are not being met, going through healthcare services who at the moment don't have, as I've been told, they're doing everything they can with the law as it stands. And so we have a real problem in the sense that there are not enough, what would you say, processes or pathways is probably the word to use, in the health area, but pathways that would facilitate the collection of remains. And it doesn't matter what kind of loss. It matters to the mother, but it shouldn't matter what kind of loss it is. And even words like wanted, unwanted, they're really hard to quantify, and it's actually just not right to look at a woman's pregnancy or, a baby that's died in that way. And there's a good reason for that, because a lot of people, even with my very first pregnancy, I was hoping and looking to be pregnant with my eldest daughter. And then when the reality happened and I found out I was expecting, I was actually afraid, thinking, is this going to hurt? How long is this going to take? How will I feel? Of course, it's a normal thing, something you haven't experienced. You've got all kinds of questions and fears. And that was me in a supported situation. I was fortunate enough to be married to a husband who also shared my hopes. But that isn't the reality for a lot of people. And in different circumstances, people don't realise that while they may feel that they're not supported, and in some cases that may be the case, they're not always unsupported. And there are a lot of people close to them, and as many people I've spoken to have said, even if I had one person support me, I might have felt differently about this. I might have kept my baby. And what really troubles me is the haste in making decisions like this. And there really is haste advocated, and I know that personally from many people who've told me that. But you have a problem because, put it this way, if you go to buy a new car, the man reminded me not that long ago, there is a cooling off period. And I said, really? And I thought, this doesn't matter, I've got enough money, it's a second-hand car, this is not a great deal to me. It was a safe decision and it wasn't affecting anybody. It wasn't going to hurt anybody. Yet when people I know very close to me have been through this kind of an experience where they're contemplating ending the life of their own child and feeling that they can't do this on their own, unsupported or whatever, for whatever the reasons, they're finding themselves in a situation where haste is being advocated, which is really quite bizarre because the way the law stands, this is a procedure that people can access, unfortunately, in our state up to birth. And sadly, it's also the very reason why people suffer so much.
Well, signing a contract, a hire purchase contract, there's that cooling off period, the purchase of a car. These things have more weight, more importance than perhaps the life term of a child.
Yeah, it can seem that way. And this is the problem because in reality, that's not true. And we know this. You talk to your mum, your sister, your auntie, your daughter. We're all living this experience. We're living the grief of people around us, and we're living people's inability to process what's actually happened. There is no language for it, and this is what makes it so very hard. There are processes and laws all very clearly defined on what should happen, and it's quite admirable the way that, car salesmen or women, actually conduct themselves. And they'll put forward the paperwork and give you a lot of information. And there's all sorts of procedures afterwards too. And in fact, they keep in touch as well, which is, quite extraordinary. The same can't be said, in terms of, when you've lost a baby, and I'm not even talking about the decision-making time, where people actually need access to people. They need to know the reality of what they're doing, not someone who, it would be like a car salesman, saying, well, look, here's all the faults of this car. Look, you probably shouldn't buy it. I mean, they're not going to do that. If there's a problem with the car, well, what I'm fumbling to say is, if there's a problem with something, the person selling it to you isn't going to be the one to tell you that. So, counselling, at clinics, there needs to be, some sort of a I suppose for want of a better word, like a bubble zone where people can actually access information for good reasons. Like, I've spoken to several young women, and from overseas as well, who've actually told me that they thought they were going for help. They thought that they were going for counselling and would then decide what they were doing. And very quickly they found themselves a bit like advertising talk, where they sort of actually believed that, this is the right thing to do. It was a logical procedure, a set of questions, and followed a journey to a conclusion. And then, it all happened so very quickly.
But no alternative given.
No, that's right.
Well, on that note, you're watching Support Life, and we'll be back after the break. Welcome back to Support Life. I'm Gavin Baulch, and my guest is Denise den-Bakker. And we were talking about words. So let me just throw something at you here. We have many religions, okay? But what about many kinds of mums? There's working mums, stay-at-home mums, part-time work mums and stay-at-home mums, mums that can change their work time so they're there for the child when they come home from school and able to take them to school. We have Mother's Day. Why not Mother's Week, Mother's Year? Is mum a good word or a bad word?
It's always a good word, as far as I'm concerned. But again, it depends on your experience too. So if you've had a loving mum who's been able to be there for you, and you've been fortunate enough to experience a lot of nurture and care, then I guess mum is a good word. Mm-hmm. If you've had a childhood where your mum was present at the times when you needed her, no matter what the circumstances, working or not, I guess it's whether your mum is there when you need her. Then at the same time, it depends too, on how we feel, living in the world that we're living in, whether we've had a good experience ourselves and whether or not we feel we could be a good mum. And I think, like everything in life, it sort of depends on the kind of support we have around us at the time. So not just mum, we also need a dad, and we need other people that care. The old line, you need a community to raise a child. Mm-hmm. None of us, exists in isolation. These are all terms we've heard a million times, I'm sure. But then if you think about mum and you think about her role in society, what is she valuable for? And every Mother's Day I think about this. What are the values of mum? I mean, if she's not present, she's facing, a real pressure to go to work. Some mums, it is their career and they're called to go and be what they are, and other mums are doing part-time work and they're happy to have that kind of balance. But I guess where my heart goes out is especially to the vulnerable women, the vulnerable mothers. They may not be supported, they may not be, they may not have the helps around them, and I think this is really what's missing in our society at the moment. There's a cultural expectation to, look beautiful, to look, as is put in the media. I know I've read at some point the way the codes of practice, I think it is, standards, that women should not be portrayed in traditional roles. And I think this creates a real, I suppose a good word is key conflict or a dilemma, where identity of a mum is really up in the air at the moment. Because, pressure to work combined with a need to be there, and when we hear words used like quality time with children, but very hard to achieve if you're feeling the pull of an employer and perhaps casual hours needing to be on call. there's a whole host of problems. You know, do you have someone else supporting you? Do you have a family that is supportive? So mums are really carrying a lot, and who cleans the house as well?
Uh-huh. Okay, well, probably what we need to do here is to take a more politically correct view of mums and not be so quick to judge a stay-at-home mum or to make her feel inadequate. Just like we shouldn't be pointing the finger at a go-to-work mum.
Absolutely.
That's using the daycare centres and what's available out there. We need to support all women in their choice and congratulate all women in those choices.
Yeah, we really do. Yeah, there's a lot of I think, pain where people are, you know, we hear this sometimes said, but where there's a pressure to perhaps appear or be a certain way, there's also a pressure to pay the bills. So there's all sorts of perspectives, and we don't understand anyone's reality. So yeah, it's a really big, I think, part of life where we don't. Seeing other people and judging is a really huge problem. We don't know what the reality is behind what we see.
Well, let's run two words together. If I'm alive, I can be given hope. All right. So if we put hope alive together, what does that conjure up?
Well, I think you know, my experience has been you know, the fact that hope means that there is better, and I think a lot of people who've had, you know, incredible circumstances in life. I think there's very few of us who have been untouched by any kind of trauma, and I think it would be very rare to find someone who hasn't experienced, you know, something of a traumatic nature. And if anything, you know, these days there's probably, you know, multiple traumas experienced in life. Yeah, and in fact we could probably even tire of hearing those words. They are said so much, and in relation to mental health and perinatal mental health too. But I guess the most important thing for us to really consider is, you know, what do we do with that?
Well, I suppose we could say to the sisterhood out there watching, talk to one another, talk about your experiences, find new words to express how you feel, where you're at, and defer one to the other in your circumstance and need.
This is where I was fortunate enough to find that a friend introduced me to those very words, Hope Alive. And, you know, had I not been, you know, fortunate enough, and I would say blessed, you know, to have been told that this exists, you know, there's a program of recovery, you know. Hope is alive when recovery is possible.
Good. Well, on that note, you've been watching Support Life, and that's all for our program today. Join us again next week. Goodbye.